Zodiac here in LA and Night Stalker, and like they all had names. And so being able to sort of create a very modern villain by adding a secret identity, which was not a secret identity, we just didn't tell you who this person was. You got to see the hand, you got to see the gun, you got to see the clue. The real message of the book is how Gotham City went from a city that was ruled by crime to a city that was ruled by freaks. And what made Holiday so interesting to me was that Holiday was kind of a marriage of both things. This was a very different kind of crime. And it really was sort of the bridge. It was like, I'm not a gangster and I'm not a freak, but I will take the gun from the gangster and I will take the little treats from the freaks and I will take a name and it'll be a mystery.
Batman Long Halloween represents really more of what the core is of a Batman story, where originally in the 1940s it started out organized crime, but quickly moved into oddball villains and crazy villains, and the Rogues Gallery eventually was adapted. So this is harkening way back to the original source material, which is what Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale did, but brought it up to more of a modern sense of storytelling, implementing all different types of crime story elements and film noir, obviously.
My love of film noir dates back to film school. I took classes in film noir, movies like Gun Crazy and White Heat.
That's where we used the gas truck. I stole it right in the gates. And when we beat it in the getaway cars, I got the truck keys in my pocket.
And where do you get the gas truck?
We got one stashed behind a barn. Bought it with our own dough. 12 grand.
You bought a gas truck?
Yeah.
What's the matter? Forget how to steal one?
Stuff that Warner Brothers was making, like weekly. These were B films that were about terrible people who did terrible things. Usually you're telling the story from the point of view of the villain. So in some weird way, you're rooting for them. That's not a way that people had ever told stories. We have to also remember that a lot of it grew out of the fact that we came home from the war in 1945. There were a lot of filmmakers and storytellers that had just come from the most horrible thing in the world. Whenever there's that kind of complete disruption of human nature, an artist is going to take a look at that and say, okay, how can we begin to understand it?
Johnny Vitti was murdered tonight.
Damn it.
The Roman's nephew.
These families, we may not like them. We may not like the Falcones and the Maroni family. We may not feel a lot of compassion for them, but we understand that they're losing family members, that they're being targeted. And Batman is also in many ways vicariously experiencing loss after loss and having to integrate that with his own history of trauma, one that hasn't really been resolved. So what's wonderful about this story is that we see this kind of formation of family with him and Commissioner Gordon and Harvey Dent.
Gentlemen.
The tragedy of the story is that Bruce Wayne, a man who grew up obviously with enormous trust issues, put his faith in two other men in the hopes that he could solve his own problem, which was to ease the pain of the death of his parents. He didn't open up to them. He didn't say, that's what I'm trying to do. He didn't say, I'm Batman and this is why I'm doing any of those things. But that's what's going on. He's using them to solve his problem.
So, just tell us what you know about the bomb in the district attorney's house, then we can all go eat.
I don't even know Carmine Falcone.
The Roman contracted your triad to take out Harvey Dent. Your signature's all over it.
Mickey, you gotta help me keep my friend here calm.
Gordon, in year one, came from Chicago in order to sort of clean up this mess. And what he succeeded in doing was sort of cleaning up the police department. He didn't really get into cleaning up the city, but that was because he hadn't made a friend yet. And, at the very end, he says, I have a friend. That's the curious thing, is that Gordon is able to say that Batman is his friend, that Harvey Dent is his friend. Those words never come out of Bruce's mouth. He's not willing to go that far. There's no doubt about it, how important they are to him. He needs a Jim Gordon to say to him, it's a line, and we don't go over that line. And I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen with you.
Chairs are for suspects. This guy's innocent.
Whoa. And he's clearly a great detective, and he clearly can go places where the police can't.
Right now, the only difference between you and me is that I know what's down here.
So let's trust each other and make it all sort of work.
Do you realize we started out trying to take down the Roman, and now we're trying to save him? When did that happen?
There are times when they're in conflict or they're kind of pointing fingers at one another, but ultimately, this is Bruce Wayne's family. These are the people that he relies on. These are the people that he works with. But this is ultimately what I would lift up as kind of the common thread here, is that this is really about family and belonging. There's a vulnerability to it. That's how the killer traumatizes our characters here.
With a serial killer who leaves clues behind and who has an MO, who kills on a certain date or a certain day of the month, there is intelligence behind what they're doing. And that is so scary because it means we can't just automatically assume that that person is mentally ill. And I think we use this term incorrectly all the time, and I'll use it here, is we say things like, well, that person's just crazy. And that's our way of dismissing it because we can't understand it.
It was a little bit of that world of the serial killer that comes on the full moon. It isn't just the night of the full moon, it's the weeks that come before it that the boogeyman is coming. It was never our intention, but a lot of the people who started to write about it or wrote to us was that the fact that it was coming out in the month that the holiday was in, and they had waited a month for the next chapter, made it that much more horrific for them because they were now a part of Gotham City and caught up in, oh, Thanksgiving's coming. Oh, Christmas is coming. New Year's Eve is coming. What am I supposed to do?
All right, who wants to drive?
Jim!
There are two marriage relationships in the movie. It's Jim Gordon and his wife, and Harvey and Gilda. And I think even in the comics, we're used to seeing, oh, there's trouble in the Gordon house. But compared to Harvey's house, they're the Waltons.
There's no way to know where or when your husband will show up.
My husband is dead.
Gilda.
I read comics growing up. I remember reading a Batman annual when I was a kid that explained Harvey's childhood and his backstory and his relationship with his father, and it was horrific. It's very helpful in understanding how someone can experience a complete breakdown in their personality, which is what we see Harvey go through.
It's hard to believe the man who stood on this roof and made that promise, that bond with each of us, would cross the line.
Can you honestly say that man and the one we met in the alley were the same? There are deep scars there.
I think that there is a legitimate mental illness that Harvey is dealing with. And in the end, he ultimately has to liberate both sides of himself so that he can live. And I think that if the marred side of him wasn't so horrible, wasn't so much of the living id who will just do anything and say anything, it may be the healthiest thing that he could do. Unfortunately, people will die.
I just want to have a normal night. Can we just have a normal night?
I don't even know what that is anymore.
I think she's a completely calculating revenge machine. and the destruction she leaves in her wake of what happens to Largo and what happens to Harvey. The offense to her, which is terrible, gets so much worse. As you take revenge, it just spreads.
I think it's because the moral decay of Gotham being controlled by organized crime, she became a victim of that ultimately, and the law wasn't able to help her. And she had to find a way to get satisfaction, but maybe a real part of her motivation was to bring down organized crime. Gilda is a hero in her own story because she finished, she's done, she took care of what she needed to take care of.
I need to know that Holiday is done.
Not done. Finished.
The book itself is incredibly cinematic. It is vivid. The use of shadow and darkness in Tim Sale's work, I've just never seen anything like it. And I think it's why everybody looked at this book and said, this is film noir, but it's a comic book.
He draws a Batman that is certainly my favorite. There's just a love of how Tim immerses the world in shadow and immerses the world in darkness. And that's why it works in Gotham City and doesn't work in Metropolis. But that's also why there's no great crime family in Metropolis. There's no darkness for them to hide in. I've worked with some of the most talented and lovely people. And I think that's really what's more important. And I think people, when they read the stories, get it. I think they look at the art and go, this is the best thing that this person's ever done. Wow, that's a great story. And I go, I don't know that it's a great story. What I do know is that I took the time in order to have the artists bring their best.
You know, things used to run smooth in this town. Now we got killer crocs and moths and sewer zombies. Not to mention a homicidal maniac skulking around the holidays hitting made men.
The birth of Holiday and how that character sort of bridged the world between gangster and freak was really an echo of the Two-Face story.
Harvey and I were so much alike.
You have a man, Harvey Dent, who is a good man and who is in love with his wife and is trying to start a family. To Batman's Dark Knight, he is seen as the White Knight. He is destroyed by crime and becomes a freak out of it. And so what Holiday enabled us to do was to sort of give foreshadowing as to what that is.
All of those costumed villains are behind bars or institutionalized at the start of the story, but as we progress, more and more of them begin appearing in Gotham City. When we finally get to the big climax of the movie, they've organized. They're a group. They've organized under Two-Face. And that is a signal that everything's about to change.
Just pull the fucking trigger.
Once the disorganized crime elements of Gotham City organize, that's the end for the Falcones and the Maronis and the old way. This is what the new order is going to be.
They are freakish, they are much different, they are outcasts, and yet they too have kind of the sense of family. They share a sense of loyalty among one another as well. So when we think about the landscape of Gotham City and the emergence of what I would consider crime families, there are some commonalities related to that sense of loyalty, that sense of belonging, at least with one another, and this sort of fight for power. Who can really claim that sense of ownership over Gotham City.
But what chance did I have opposite the godfather of Gotham?
I think ultimately with a person like Gilda, there's a strong, deep sense of wanting to create a world that she is more in control of. It's really kind of interesting that what she feels is this disconnection and detachment from her husband. It seems as though she believes that if she herself kind of enters this criminal world, she can eliminate the very thing that Harvey is obsessed with.
Gilda, I'm sorry. We'll make the late movie. I'm looking forward to it.
I think I'd like to go home.
She ends up engaging in criminal behavior that moves Harvey further and further away from her. And then she becomes his obsession. She ends up, in her own way, becoming the very person, the very thing that Harvey is in a relationship with. And Harvey himself is victimized, and he transforms into a criminal. And I think that Gilda is responsible for that.
At the end of the day, they did lose Harvey. They had not only a new threat in Two-Face, they had a threat in Two-Face who could organize the freaks. Now they had organized freak crime, which was not something that they had before.
This city's finally got a chance, and it's the three men standing here right now.
People talk about the triad in this movie of Jim Gordon and Harvey Dent and Batman, and I think no. There's four guys fighting corruption and trying to save the city. Carmine is doing the same thing. Much like Two-Face, much like Holiday, his methods are distasteful, but he still has that pure motivation.
Crime has a history. Crime is a business. At the end of the day, the villains are there for a purpose. And if you could tell the story from their point of view and see what a horrible wrecking ball Batman is to their world, you'd have a completely different view of what's going on.
Sophia, please. It was nothing. Stop treating me like an old man.
You're not old.
Carmine Falcone, much like Marlon Brando's performance as Vito Corleone, is a family man, and that's really what it's about. And a businessman. And he sees this craziness that's happening and has to do something about it. It's one of my favorite scenes, which is when he says to Batman, "You've done nothing to stop this."
Do you know what my people call this past year? The Long Halloween.
It is his point of view. It is a valid point of view.
Your father's captain now. The whole department's counting on him.
Well, I was counting on him too.
This story is about the breakdown of family, all sorts of families. When I think about holidays, I think about family. And that is the time when Holiday strikes for a reason. I think it is to drive home the point about what was done to her family, what's being done to the other families in Gotham. And I think when the point is made, she hangs up the hat because she's done.
They're all motivated by revenge in a different way. Alberto is, and Gilda is, and Bruce is, and Harvey is. And the one thing that no one in these movies can do is forgive. As soon as any of these characters said, what happened was terrible, and I'm gonna walk away from it, then there is no more movie. Because even though Bruce has decided to never take a life while he's doing this, he's still just an agent of revenge, because it's all about fixing what happened to his parents. And Holiday is trying to fix what happened to Holiday, and Harvey is trying to fix what he thinks happened to his relationship with Gilda, and Alberto is trying to fix the wrong of what's happened to him.
You know, Gotham City represents moral decay. It's always represented that. Batman came about as a response to that moral decay. And that's exactly what Holiday was born of. So in a way, they have a lot in common. And I think Bruce sees that, and he has a little bit of empathy.
The idea of a gunman with a .22 caliber knocking off guys in the mob, which always puts you in that place of, well, isn't that what Batman's job is? Like, so why do anything? Why not just let them kill them all? That's where it really got to be interesting, which was Batman being torn over, should I stop this person?
There is a rule among my kind. We leave the wives out of it. But Dent does not play by our rules.
Carmine Falcone absolutely destroyed her life and what her future life was going to be. And she felt betrayed also by the man she thought she loved.
What will you do now? Tell Gordon?
Ultimately, at the end, once she laid it all out and was destroying the evidence, Batman's standing there, letting her destroy the evidence. Batman is judge and jury at that point.
I don't think Batman is trying to make criminals pay. I think he's trying to fix Gotham City. And once Holiday is not a threat to Gotham City, he's got to move on to whatever's happening right now.
I couldn't get past the little boy who saw his parents getting murdered in front of him, and how that destroyed him, and how that created a man who would never be able to heal, never fall in love, never have a family of his own. Like, all of the things that you would think at this point Bruce would try to do, it never happened. He only stayed on mission. This particular story gave an opportunity for him to be free. If they had won, if at the end of the day, Harvey had not turned on him, and Carmine Falcone went to jail, and the Holiday Killer was caught, that Gotham City would have been the way it was. There would have been a little relief to what it was. But again, we always come back to that same problem, which is the promise. I would rid the city of the evil that took my parents' life. It really, at the end of the day, is the responsibility that you decide to take on when you become a hero. And that's something that I've always believed in, that a hero is someone who stands up when everybody else is told to sit down.